Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how CEOs, founders, and senior executives sell their ideas, point of view, and personal brand to the people who matter most. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want to build market eminence, amplify your influence, and attract high-value prospects, investors, partners, talent, and media opportunities with less chasing and more confidence. Let's go. Podcasting, my friends, podcasting. This podcast, any podcast, your podcast, B2B podcast. We're talking about all of this with the awesome, the amazing, the one, the only. I hope you're ready. She's here. Rachel Downey, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. This feels like a very meta conversation. I can't wait for it.
Well, it is. It is. So it's almost like, we'll talk about B2B podcasting. We'll talk about the benefits, the outcomes, the results, the metrics. But I'm curious because you're in such a fantastic niche business. Could you just take a moment and tell us the story of how you came to do the work that you're doing today, and what were some interesting pit stops along the way?
Sure. I'll try and make the long story short. But in 2016, my daughter was born about 3 months early, and I found myself sitting at the hospital trying to figure out what my life was going to look like because I wasn't sure what hers was going to look like. And I had previously spent over a decade in content marketing, specifically running campaigns for lead gen. And while I was sitting in the hospital, serendipitously, a friend reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I just launched a podcast. Would you be willing to help me kind of launch it, promote it, etc.?" He knew my background. I said, yeah, absolutely. I could do it at 3 a.m., 2 a.m., 2 p.m. It didn't matter. So I said, yes, I will help you launch your podcast and help promote it. And within 6 months of him launching his podcast, he had launched it alongside a net new company, a net new brand. So within 6 months of him doing that, he had generated over 6 figures worth of pipeline and had created a whole bunch of content at the same time. And so I went, holy cow, I've never seen anything work this efficiently, this effectively, in such a short amount of time. Because what he was doing was ultimately building relationships and then leveraging that content across all of his channels so people knew who he was, who he hung out with, and what he was all about. And so it was this amazing proof point for his new business. So fast forward, I went all in on podcasting in about 2017 and have been sticking around since.
So this is something that people, maybe me included, would pay a lot of money to figure out, is how do you take a B2B podcast and how do you turn it not only into subscribers and, top 0.5% on listen notes and, thousands of downloads per episode, but how do you turn a podcast into revenue? I know it's not a straight line, like start with A, jump to B, make $1 million, but that 6 figures of pipeline, was this about interviewing prospects? Was this about putting the podcast into the right other people's hands? Was it about kind of promoting certain episodes to certain type of people in certain demographics? I mean, what are the building blocks of getting a pipeline going from a podcast?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there's a couple things I want to debunk a little bit as we kind of get into this. So I'm coming at this from the vantage point of a podcast can be your content engine. And so just to kind of level set there to make sure we have shared language, I don't care about downloads. I think it's silly, sounds mean, but I don't think it's necessary for you to care about your percentage ranking and listen notes. All of those things are more social proof, social credibility, but they're not going to be things that actually help you move the needle. If you want to monetize your podcast in the traditional way, in today's marketplace, you're going to have 30,000 downloads a month to even rake in some money that's meaningful for you to make this your full-time job. So let me just say those things first. So when we're talking about working with B2B brands, really what we're saying is you should be using a podcast to fill your sales pipeline, to drive your social strategy and fuel your thought leaders. So that's the way that we're thinking about it foundationally. And I think the last thing I'll say before I kind of give you the how, which is actually answering your question, David, is like anything, you get what you get out of it, what you put in. So if a podcast is another thing on your to-do list that you're just doing because you feel like everyone's doing it, you're not going to get the results that you want to see out of it. Just like going to the gym, once a quarter isn't going to help you build any meaningful muscle mass. So just like some of that foundational stuff. So in the use case I was talking about with my friend, the same principles still apply today across anybody wanting to launch a podcast to drive pipeline. And it's starting with building a relationship. Any way to build pipeline begins and ends with starting a relationship. And 9 times out of 10, the only way that somebody's ever going to buy from you is if they have an opportunity to have a conversation with you. And so a podcast becomes like the bridge, the meeting point from somebody who doesn't know you to somebody getting to know you, and doing it in a way that allows them to kind of break down or like break the wall that they have down. I've talked to some clients and I'm like, how much would you pay to have your ideal person sit with you for an hour and them drop their guard? How much would you pay? $10, $1,500? Like, how much would you pay? Most people would pay a good amount of money. The other thing I'll say, and then we can get more tactical if you want to, but the other thing I'll say is take that same viewpoint and say, how much would you pay, or how much would it be worth for you to be in front of X amount of people on like a weekly basis? What does that number need to be where it's worth your time to fly, to speak, to whatever? Like, what is worth that? What is worth that? And a lot of times people will be like, I don't know, 30 people, 15. And all of a sudden their idea of like, I wanted hundreds of thousands of downloads suddenly doesn't really matter, because the numbers are completely relative based on the business and the goals that you have.
Totally spot on. That is a fantastic. People need to rewind right now, pull over on the car, get off the treadmill, rewind, listen to that last 2-minute answer, probably 5 times over, because it's totally not about quantity. It's about quality, it's about relevance, and it's about relationship. I'm totally behind 1,000% what you're saying. Let's turn the tables. So you're a seasoned podcast host. You've hosted and produced thousands of episodes. You and I have a great conversation, 20, 30-minute conversation. We turn off the microphones. I might even say, Rachel, you're an amazing interviewer. This was the most fun I've had in weeks. Thank you so much. When does the episode come out? Can't wait to share it with my team. Can't wait to put it on our corporate website. Thanks so much. Goodbye. It's like, okay. So obviously we don't let it go at that. There's some follow-up. Maybe there's some seeds you can plant during and immediately after the interview. But in that scenario that I just painted, where do we go from awesome guest experience to, I might be able to use what Rachel does or what Rachel's company does? Where's that pivot?
Well, I think the pivot, that the whole thing is happening the entire time. So there's really not a need to have a pivot, because it should be happening very naturally. So you said the first thing that I want to call out, make sure people actually pay attention to, is an amazing guest experience. The guest experience is an extension of your brand. And so when somebody says yes to coming on your podcast, you should have done research you should have done research to let them know why you're asking them to come on the podcast to begin with. Too often people are relying on AI or bot-like humans who are just sending things out without any attention to the detail. And if you're trying to target a busy executive and you're sending them spam type messaging to get them on your show, they're not going to stop and pay attention. So making sure that you're intentional and simple with your request. I'd like to have you on the show because you can talk about this thing, which resonates with my audience. Would you be up for it? Yeah. So simple. They say yes. They come on. You prep them. First of all, you remind them that they're coming on. You send them an email before they come on so they know what they're doing and what they said yes to. So you're giving them sort of like 5-star treatment along the way. They come on the show, and the first thing you do is get to know each other a little bit. And you say, like, I had an opportunity to learn more about your business. Let me ask you a couple questions. Guess what those questions can be? Discovery questions about helping you understand what it is about what you do that could potentially be beneficial to them. And then there is the psychological, I always mess this up, so forgive me. But there is a psychological impact of the power of reciprocity, where if somebody is taking the time to get to know me and care about me and pays attention to all the nuances, I'm going to want to ask them about them, right? And so you're creating the opportunity to have that connection. So we're doing that as part of our prep for the actual recording of the session. So that would be part of it. And then you go to actually record the thing. And then to your point, you're at the very end and you're like, this was great. Talk to you soon. Well, this was great. Talk to you soon when? And so it would be like a good opportunity for you to be like, hey, at the beginning of the call, we started talking about XYZ. You said this thing. I'm curious, would it make sense for us to actually explore that a little bit further? Would you be open to talking a little bit more? You just want to open up the lines of communication. If in your gut, you're like, this person isn't vibing, they don't want to do that, then obviously don't do that. No one wants to feel like they have a bait, like a switch. What do they call that? The hook and
Bait
switch.
And switch.
Bait and switch. Thank you. Nobody wants to feel that. So you have to use a little bit of your EQ here. But it is an opportunity to build a relationship. And the other thing that you can do before you hang up is two things. Is I would say, I'm going to be back in your inbox when the episode goes live. Make sure that I'm going to give you some stuff to make sure that, again, we're giving that 5-star experience. I'm going to share your show. I'd love for you to share your show, that whole thing. The other thing you can do is go, now that you haven't experienced my show, is there anybody in your network that would make sense for me to invite on? So not only are you getting access to their network, which is also power of podcasting and creating content, but again, you're being intentional with relationship building. I know from my sales quota that I can close at 60, 70% if it's a warm lead versus my 30% when I don't know them. So you're asking for a warm intro from somebody that you've just now had an opportunity to start a relationship with. So
Yeah.
To wrap that up in a pretty little bow, there's no need to pivot if you're paying attention the entire way and you're giving them a 5-star experience every step so that the conversation opportunity comes through very naturally.
Hey, super quick station break question. Have you seen our free executive briefing on elevating your CEO brand? Check it out right now at doitmarketing.com/webinar. And now back to the show. That is really, really important. I want to pick up and maybe dive a little bit deeper into one thing that you said, which is pre-show preparation materials. So obviously in a sales, if this was a sales conversation with somebody, they would have visited our website, they would have gone to LinkedIn, they might have clicked on a couple of things. When they book a call and they know it's a sales call, we know it's a sales call, they're raising their hand going, hey, I'd like to talk to you. You can then send them some pre-call materials to say, well, just so you know, here's what we do. Here's a quick 3-minute video. Listen to this 7-minute podcast. And here's a PDF that might be helpful. Some people consume that content. Some consume it and study it very deeply. Some don't consume it at all. But at least there's some pre-call, what I call pre-indoctrination materials. That's for a sales call. For a podcast guest, is that too much, or how do you modify that so that it gets the person warmed up, does not seem like a bait and switch, and it's actually helpful to them to have a really great guest experience too?
Yeah, I think the point, the thing I want to make sure is really clear is like, this is not set up to be a sales call, but it is set up to be discovery, right? And I don't mean sales discovery. I mean discovery of each other and starting to build the building blocks of a relationship. And so you always want to put your guest at ease, and you want them to know that you're intentional along the way. Because again, that's an extension of your brand. So I would send them, here's an example of a previous episode that I think you'd resonate with. I took the time to curate an episode that I thought you would appreciate. Yeah. Also, I'm planning to ask you these handful of questions. Now, you can take what I just said and turn this into much, much bigger or much simpler. It totally depends on what's like, what you have the resources to do. But I would very simply say, like, you can also offer a prep call. So you can be like, here's some things. Some of our clients, we suggest a prep call because of the meat of the show, but also because it gives them more opportunity to build relationship with people. Yeah. So sometimes it slows things down, but it also helps speed things up along the way because we've already built a relationship. Now, I will say this, if you're using your show to generate sales pipeline, it is not a short-term thing. It is a long-term play because relationships do take time to build. So it's not like they're coming in like ready to buy, right? But it is starting the conversation. One of the things that I try and do when I think about inviting people on my podcast, and I use it for several different reasons, but one of the reasons I use it for is I do have people that I'm trying to build a relationship with, but the other reason is like, I'm looking at who's engaging with my stuff already. And if they are sort of what you would consider MQL, they're engaging with our content, they're talking about us or they're following us or they're viewing my page or whatever, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to invite them on the podcast because maybe they haven't self-identified and sent me an inbound form to talk about things. But why would I not just nudge it along to see if there's an opportunity here for us to explore together?
Right, exactly. And just for any civilians listening in, MQL is Marketing Qualified Lead, which is the first step before you become an SQL, which is a Sales Qualified Lead, where someone actually does explicitly want to have a conversation with you. You are obviously very media savvy. You're a host, you're a very seasoned guest. I'm a host, I'm a very seasoned guest. You and I know what to do and what to say when microphones are turned on. When we're inviting quote unquote civilians onto our show, I see a couple of obstacles. Number one, they may give very short, almost cursory answers, very curt, because a little defensiveness, they're not quite comfortable in front of the microphone yet. That's number one. So how do you get people to open up more so that they can have a conversation like you and I are having?
So one is, I do think running a prep call or offering it is always worthwhile, especially people who aren't necessarily, it depends on your niche, but you'll know if it's a common practice for people to be on podcasts or not.
Yeah.
You'll also, not everyone's going to say yes either. So that's another thing just to keep in mind when you're doing your guest outreach, and that's completely fine. Not everyone likes to be on the microphone or the camera or anything. So you have to keep that in mind. But I would say the way that you break down walls is by being vulnerable yourself. And so vulnerability is not being unhinged and oversharing, but vulnerability is letting people know how you're feeling and how you're doing and not trying to cover up or be put on or whatever. And the other thing I always say is get the red scary dot out of the way. So just start recording and just start asking people questions that allow them to kind of be themselves. And the other thing I always encourage people to do is just because your conversation is an hour, it doesn't mean you're going to use that full hour. So you could take 15 minutes to even walk people through. Have you ever done a podcast recording before? Yes, no. So I'm going to walk you through the tech we're using. I'm going to walk you through what my process looks like. Be a host, facilitate, almost like if you were hosting a party. Welcome to my home. The bathroom's over here. There's water there. If you want some alcohol, it's in the back. Make yourself at home. You want to make people feel at home in your virtual studio. So walk them through what you're doing, why you're doing it. The other thing I would say is to your point of people giving short cursory answers and not going into real depth. If you care about the content, then you want them to go into the depth, right? And so I would stay in it longer with them than they feel like they want to. So I'd be you said this thing, tell me more. Or how did that make you feel? And then what happened? And then what happened? There's things you can do that allow people to just spend a little bit more time with the answer. And then you're going to get them to kind of ultimately unveil a little bit more about who they are.
Yeah, no, I love that. I want to go to now the other kind of guest, which might be a CEO or a CMO or someone who's been on shows a lot. We're trying to get them to open up about perhaps some gaps or some blind spots or some problem areas. They show up like super people, right? They're invulnerable. They're 100% successful. Rachel, I've never made a mistake in my entrepreneurial career. I make zillions of dollars. No, we hit our revenue goals 3x, 5x. What do you mean we need more pipeline? We have millions of social media followers. Our social media is flawless. Dude, you got 17 people on Instagram. It's not, you're a disaster. But they're not going to admit in a public forum like a podcast that they're having some difficulty or obstacles or challenges. When you have a seasoned guest, C-suite executive, VP level, B2B person that you're trying to build a genuine relationship with, it's not a bait and switch, but you are doing this kind of discovery that you talked about. How do you get them to be more vulnerable besides me, myself being more vulnerable, but they're still behind the bulletproof glass?
I think you ask permission. So just like in good sales training and sales technique, it's before you prescribe, you should ask them if you can. Before you ask the question, you should ask them if you can. And the other thing I would say is your premise matters. So if the premise of your show is about training your dog and that has nothing to do with the business that you're in or the people you want to sell to, and you have a CMO come on and you start talking to them about what's their LTV look like, what channels are they looking to optimize for right now, they're going to be like, what does that have to do with the dog training? Like,
can we talk about my golden retriever?
right, exactly. So you definitely don't want to create an inauthentic experience in the sense that like you told them the premise was this, and now you're asking them 1,000 questions. Now, I will say there's this beautiful little thing that happens when you record online and in person too, but you have to stop pressing record at some point and make sure that the file's uploaded, right? So you can stop recording and then be like, at the very beginning of the call, you want to run a pre-call, right? Here's what to expect. Here's what the bathroom is. Here's where the water is. Like, you're going to run them through it. And then when you say, I'm going to press stop record, and then we're going to hang out for a minute afterward just to make sure the files upload. Sound good. Well, the files are uploading and I'm pausing. I'm going, thank you so much for talking to me about your golden retriever. It was super helpful for my audience. I am curious though. We didn't really get a lot of time to talk about your business and kind of some of the stuff you're working on. You got a few minutes to share now? So that's like a really easy way to do it. Assuming you haven't gone over, or you say, we didn't get a chance to like dig into your business. A few things came to mind for me that just didn't make sense for the show. Would you be up for meeting again and us just doing some more networking and learning a little bit more about how we might learn more about one another? That doesn't feel negative to you, does it?
No.
Because you're not like, I want to tell you about my product and show you a demo. No, I just want to understand a little bit more about your business now that we have a chance to build a relationship.
Wait. We're not just going to listen to this episode. There are downloads, there are resources, there are links, there are bonuses waiting for you on this episode's page when you go over to doitmarketing.com/podcast. That's right, doitmarketing.com/podcast. Grab the notes right under this episode. See you over there.
Do you think the first half, I love the after interview, right? The interview after the interview.
Yeah.
And the conversation after the conversation. Would it help for Mr. or Ms. Super CMO? I love what you said about asking permission. So that might sound like, Rachel, I'm going to ask you kind of a tough question here on the air. And I hope you're going to be generous enough to share the real deal answer. Where do you feel your next level of success? Like, you're already successful. Where do you feel your next level of success? What do you need to unlock for the next level of success? So we don't put them in a position of, you're a struggler, you're a loser,
right.
You don't know what you're doing, you don't know how to figure this out, I'm the smart one, you're the dumb one. You say, listen, you're already a rock star. What do you think you need to unlock, or what problem do you need to solve to get to your next level of success? So you're stroking their ego, but you're also saying, hey, give me a juicy problem that you have right now.
You could do that. Absolutely. If you wanted to add like a nod of vulnerability to it, you could be like, I'm trying to figure some stuff out myself. I'm always trying to learn from smart people who are figuring out different things. What's the thing that you're doing to unlock that next level of success? So you're coming at it from a place of genuine curiosity for yourself, but then it might uncover an opportunity for you to explore a different conversation with that person.
Well, that is so huge. So you mentioned something a few minutes ago that the premise of the show is important. I think what you're just saying now is that your personal come from is also very important, right? If you're being genuine, if you're being authentic,
yes.
If you're coming into this interview with real caring and concern and curiosity, and you're saying, hey, listen, I don't have this all figured out either.
Who does?
Right.
Honestly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think the thing that you said that's really powerful, and like too often what I see with interview-based shows a lot of time in B2B is that people start it because they've decided it's a good idea for X, Y, or Z. But then they get into the interview and they're just checking the box of the conversation. And you can actually tell that they're not actually present.
Yeah.
So everyone's just playing pretend like they're cool with the fact that they're spending an hour together. But you have a host who's not really that engaged. And then you have a guest that's also just like, I guess he's not that interested in me anyway. So it's like being actually like present for your interview and staying curious is so like underdone. And I don't know why, because it is such a powerful medium, and the people you're having on, I might not buy from you, but my friend might, you know what I'm saying? And so it's like, we are in the people first world today. And it's like, if you're not putting the people first and the people moment with an actual person, like, come on now. So that's my little soapbox moment. But
yes, no, that's really, really important. It's funny, like, why would people even bother doing a podcast if they're just checking the boxes and they're just sort of, because I've probably been a guest on 100 shows, but I've probably been on 100 different shows over the years. I can think of maybe two times, maybe not even two, maybe one or two times where I could just get this vibe from the host that, like, they just don't really want to be here. They're just like, well, I need an episode. This guy came across my inbox. I guess I'll do the show.
Yes, exactly.
And it feels yucky
for everybody.
Yeah.
And it makes you not ever want to talk, or you don't want to promote that episode, like nothing. So it does everyone a disservice. And I think that people do it because there's this feeling in marketing sometimes where it's like, everybody's doing it, so I do too.
Yeah.
And it's like, just don't, it's kind of what I said at the beginning. You get out of it what you put into it. Yeah. And so if you're not willing to put into it and you're not clear on why you're doing it with clear outcomes, then don't do it.
Absolutely. Well, and that really applies to everything in marketing and in sales and in business. So walk me through a little bit your, because Share Your Genius is, full end-to-end production for brands and people who want to start and launch and monetize a podcast for all these different things we've been talking about: pipeline, social media, etc. Walk us through kind of the range of things. Like when you say end to end, give me end number 1 over here and end number 17 over here. And what are some of the fun things in between that you help with?
Yeah. And I think, I mentioned sort of how I got into this at the beginning, that I was a content marketer forever. And I was using content marketing to drive leads. And the reason I bring that up is because when Share Your Genius was founded, we're not like radio people who got into podcasting. We're not like production people who got into podcasting. We're actually marketers who found a channel that we knew that we could leverage for helping our clients win. And so when we talk about end to end, we're talking about obviously the technical setup of launching a great show, the creative execution, the strategy, the design, what does a great guest look like, sound like, what does your show need to sound like in terms of like the show flow and all of those. So that's kind of obvious of what we do. But it's very anchored on the marketing activation around it. And so when we produce a podcast episode for our clients, we're obviously going to take care of the essentials, which would be like your show and the show notes and the getting it out to the world and all that. But we're also going to evaluate the channels for distribution. And we're going to look to leverage your show and turn it into other pieces of content designed natively for the channels that you're looking to grow: YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever. And so we are packaging every episode that we produce for our clients with a marketing kit that supports that. And because we've been able to do that well, we also are able to do things like get our clients on other podcasts. We're also able to just take on their mic time content in general. So it could be content that's not going onto the podcast feed, but maybe there's 20 minutes that we cut up into other pieces of content, so they have like their always on content covered. Maybe we're going to pull together their explainer video. Like, we've just gotten an opportunity to really get to know our clients. And so it becomes more of like, we're your go-to-market media team. We just start with a podcast because it is, in my opinion, still today, the best place to start your content engine.
Totally. And I love that. So did I hear you right that you also, you help them identify who would be the ideal guest? Do you also help them book the guests?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You do? Yeah.
We'll do all the booking. We'll do all the pre-production. We've built out full studios for people if they want like a at office experience. It's literally, and I always say our tagline is, it's never just a podcast, because it's not, but we can do all the pieces that make it happen.
Now, you also, because you mentioned that we're not radio people that got into podcasting, we're actually marketing people that got into podcasting. But you now, since 2016, you have had quite a lot of podcast experience yourself, launching them, hosting them, spreading them, sharing them. Talk about a couple of your shows that you were involved in on the hosting side of the microphone.
It's funny, the Cobbler's kids rarely have shoes or whatever that phrase is.
Yeah.
So that's definitely been the case for us for many years. I have a million ideas that I haven't been able to execute because we're so worried about taking care of our clients. But I have a show that I launched a couple years ago it was originally called Voicemails with Rachel. And it was really an opportunity for me to build relationships with people that I didn't know, that I wanted to know, but do it in a way that was very short form so that it was sustainable for me. I think too often people think podcast equals long form interview instead of actually looking at what's sustainable for the host that you have and also looking at the talent that you have. David, you're extremely charismatic. Like there's a lot of people who aren't and cannot hold their own as an interviewer, but they're running a show in that way. You're not actually maximizing their strength. You're actually potentially weakening the thing that they could have been okay at. You know what I'm saying? So we designed a format that worked best for me and the demands that I have as somebody growing a company and leading a company. So that was that. And then as the company has grown, there's other people within the organization that I don't want this to be the Rachel show. I want it to be the Share Your Genius, channel. And so I brought on other account executives, we call them strategic leads, to help host the episode so that I do a batch every month. And then I have other people on my team who can run some as well, but it all fits the same premise of the show. And it's this idea of like people leaving us these voicemails, which you're coming on next to leave me one. And so it's been very sustainable. And then the other thing that we've done is we've partnered with people who have a platform already, who have a show, and kind of sponsor it by me being a co-host so that I'm not carrying the weight of the full show because I don't have the capacity for it, but I'm able to be aligned with his audience, his message, and his platform, but then we handle all the production for him. So sort of getting creative with how I can create win-win scenarios that elevate us, but do it in a way that is sustainable for the business. And then the last show that we typically do is an annual podcast, and it's called Wait For It. And we do an annual review of the industry based on under the lens of the B2B space. And so I'll do like a 30 to 45 minute deep dive into the industry, and we use that content for the rest of the year.
Does that usually come out in December or January or when?
It comes out Valentine's Day because I do a love letter. I do a love letter to the industry.
Nice. That is so brilliant. I mean, I even love the title. Wait for it, because you have to wait for it.
You have to wait for it.
So let's talk about it, because when you said do a show that fits your strengths and fits your bandwidth and your preferences, are most of the shows that you recommend to your clients interview shows, or is there also a lot of juice to be squeezed if it's just a solo one-way show?
Yeah, it really depends on the goal that they have. I will say that most people are more dynamic in conversation. And so it's less about an interview all the time, but it's more about what's the guest component. Is it a person from the team that you're having on? Are you being produced, meaning we're asking you questions and you're answering them? It really comes down to the goal. And then it comes down to what we just talked about with like their zone of genius, right? And more often than not, what I find is that you can have a guest option and a solo option and maximize it for different reasons. So you might want some voice of the customer episodes, or you might want to do the building of the relationship like we talked about. But we also might want to stand up our host as an expert. And so we want to give her some prompts so that she's able to like speak directly to her people. So it literally comes down to the outcome. And then we design with that in mind.
Brilliant. I really love that. Well, as we're landing the plane, I'm going to have two final questions for you. The final question is where can people go to get connected and stay connected to more genius from Share Your Genius? But even before we get to that, if folks were to take one overarching concept or idea from our conversation today about the power, the genuine power, the exciting power and future of B2B podcasting as a pipeline strategy, as a social strategy, as a content engine, what do you hope that overarching idea might be?
I think just people buy from people. And so if you're a business leader and you're trying to figure out how do I grow my company, your job is to put your people out into the world in a way that allows your buyers to find them. And so I would put my people on a microphone, whether it's getting them on other podcasts or creating my own, but making sure that you're doing it in a way that's very authentic to that person, as opposed to prescribing something that you think they need to do because somebody else is doing it.
Brilliant. Now, how can people get connected and stay connected to more Rachel Downey genius and also more Share Your Genius genius?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best way for us to connect. I'm pretty active on that channel. You'll find me under Rachel Eltz Downey. There's a million Rachel Downeys out there, and we all suddenly somehow look alike. So I got to throw the Eltz in there so you can find me.
Excellent. And so we'll have links to the website and your LinkedIn directly under this episode at thesellingshow.com. Well, Rachel, you are a rock star. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being on with us.
Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.